20 Gross Edwardian Trends. The Edwardian era, 1901 to 1910, was short but intense. The early years of the 20th century were marked by the spread of highly infectious and contagious diseases and hygiene trends that caused people to live in squalor. Things only got worse with the outbreak of World War I, which led to the spread of even more diseases. In this video, we're going to talk about 20 gross Edwardian hygiene trends. But before we get into that, be sure to subscribe and let us know in the comments which hygiene trend grosses you out the most. Some of these trends began in the Victorian era, and they remained popular until the end of World War I. Number 1. Sewage water often got mixed up with drinking water. In the early 20th century, drinking water was usually highly contaminated. Contents from sewage water often leaked into drinking water sources. This is one of the reasons why it was so easy for diseases like cholera and typhoid to spread among the populace. Number 2. People threw human excrement on the streets. Due to an abundance of houses that were built close to the factories and the lack of effective plumbing systems, people often threw feces out on the streets. Hordes of people would be walking on the streets that were all full of human poop, and it was not an uncommon sight. Nobody thought it was gross because people weren't aware that poop is full of bacteria. Number 3. Women in royal courts used porcelain jugs to relieve themselves when out and about. These porcelain jugs were placed under their heavy skirts, and oftentimes they relieved themselves while they were in the middle of a conversation. Number 4. Sponge and Lysol were used as contraceptives. Women inserted sponges inside themselves and also used Lysol, the same Lysol that's now used as a disinfectant, to prevent pregnancy. And this remained in practice until the 1920s. Underground cesspits containing carcasses and excrements often overflowed. Dead bodies of animals were often thrown into the river and in underground cesspits, and these cesspits often ended up overflowing, which resulted in a terrible stench of carcasses just lying on the streets. Number 6. Tapeworm pills were consumed to lose weight. Once the person had lost the desired amount of weight, they would have to take an anti-parasitic pill and get rid of the tapeworm by pooping it out. Number 7. Waste from bedside urinals was thrown onto the streets. People did enjoy just dumping things onto the streets in the past. In the early 20th century, people often got rid of urine and feces from bedside urinals along with the kitchen garbage by dumping them on the streets. Number 8. Homemade menstrual cloths were widely used. These cloth pads were meant to be reusable, and it wasn't until 1920, after the end of World War I, that the sanitary napkin became popular. Number 9. Toothpaste was made out of powdered cuttlefish. Poor people didn't have access to toothpaste and toothbrushes, so they came up with some very weird concoctions for toothbrushes and toothpaste. For toothbrushes, they would often use celery, and toothpaste, they would often use a mixture of chalk, soot, and cuttlefish. Number 18. People emptied cesspools and sold the content as fertilizers. Modern plumbing wasn't a thing back then, and waste from toilets was thrown into cesspools at night, because people believed it was too disturbing to be done during the day, and it was sold to people, to farmers, as fertilizer. Number 11. Listerine was used to cure STDs and dandruff. Listerine, the mouthwash, was initially marketed as a cure for STDs and dandruff. It was also used to clean floors. It wasn't marketed as mouthwash until 1914. Number 12. People often used corncobs to wipe themselves. Toilet paper rolls were invented in 1891, but in many rural areas, poor people still didn't have access to proper toilet equipment. They would often use old newspapers and corncobs to wipe themselves. Number 13. Clothes were washed with a mixture of ashes and human urine. In places where washing machines weren't available, people washed their clothes with a concoction made of ashes and human urine. Number 14. Sheep's feet were sold as a delicacy. These were called trotters, and they were sold to working-class people by vendors who prepared them at home. Number 15. Sticking raw meat on your face. Would you be willing to leave slices of raw meat on your face overnight to get rid of wrinkles? Because that's what people did in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Number 16. Eating stray cats. In the slums of Manchester, there were people who often caught stray cats and ate them. Number 17. Poor people relieved themselves wherever they could. Indoor toilets became popular in the 1930s. Before that, it was common for people to relieve themselves on the streets if they couldn't find a toilet, and more often than not, they couldn't. Number 18. No undergarments for women. While undergarments were popular among men, they didn't become common among women until the 1920s, mostly because it was believed that only men had the right to wear undergarments. Number 19. The smell of menstrual blood was considered attractive. People had extremely polarizing opinions about menstruation in the past. Many people believed it indicated sexual maturity, which is why the smell was considered sensual. Number 20. Children were employed to get rid of horse dung. There were thousands of horses on the streets of London in the early 20th century. As a result, horse feces on the streets were a common sight. Children aged between 12 and 14 were usually made to pick up horse dung and get rid of it. The concept of cleanliness and personal hygiene has come a long way. It didn't gain traction until the end of World War I. And it's insane to think that just 100 years ago, more than half of the population of the world lived in squalor. Which of these trends did you dislike the most? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to hit the thumbs up button and share this video with your friends so they can learn to be more grateful for living in the 21st century.